This is week 4 of a series called Taking It to the Streets. So look at the spread of the gospel in the book of Acts. And this one's called First Things. And it's about prayer. It's about prayer as being essential to our lives, to our walk, to be a source of life and power and strength, to spiritual life and growth and health. We all know that we're supposed to do that. So why don't we do it? Why don't we participate in it? We know that it's vital. Why do we do so little of it? We see singing and teaching and praying and preaching and all that kind of stuff, but less prayer by ourselves as individuals and even in our church settings. And when we do pray, they tend to be vague, they tend to be generic, they tend to be superficial. We should be praying bigger prayers. We should be praying better prayers. Mark Dever says Christians should pray so much that non-believers get bored. We need to recognize the greatness of God through our prayers and make our prayer life better. So in Acts chapter 12, we see an example of this. About that time, King Herod violently attacked some who belonged to the church, and he executed James, John's brother, with the sword. When he saw that it pleased the Jews, he proceeded to arrest Peter, too, during the festival of unleavened bread. After the arrest, he put him in prison and assigned 4 squads of 4 soldiers each to guard him, intending to bring him out to the people after the Passover. So Peter was kept in prison, but the church was praying fervently to God for him. When Herod was about to bring him out for a trial, that very night, Peter, bound with chains, was sleeping between 2 soldiers, while the sentries in front of the door guarded the prison. Suddenly an angel of the Lord appeared, and a light shone in the cell. Striking Peter on the side, he woke him and said, "Get up," and the chains fell off his wrists. "Get dressed," the angel told him, "and put on your sandals." And he did. "Wrap your cloak around you," he said, "and follow me." So he went out and followed him. He did not know what the angel did was really happening, but he thought he was seeing a vision. After they passed the first and second guards, they came to the iron gate that leads into the city, which opened to them by itself. They went outside, passed one street, and suddenly the angel left him. When Peter came to himself, he said, "Now I know for certain that the Lord has sent his angel and rescued me from Herod's grasp and from all the Jewish people expected." As soon as he realized this, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John Mark, where many had assembled and were praying. He knocked at the door of the outer gate, and a servant named Rhoda came to answer. She recognized Peter's voice, and because of her joy, she did not open the gate, but ran in and announced that Peter was standing at the outer gate. "You're out of your mind," they told her, but she kept insisting that it was true, and they said, "It's an angel." Peter, however, kept knocking, and when they opened the door and saw him, they were amazed. Motioning them with his hand to be silent, he described to them how the Lord had brought him out of prison. "Tell these things to James and the brothers," he said, and left and went to another place. At daylight there was great commotion among the soldiers as to what had become of Peter. So they're praying for Peter, and all of a sudden he's rescued. They're praying hardcore for him, and all of a sudden he's freed in the middle of the night from the prison that he's in. What does that say to us? How important should prayer be for us? Well, it should be first thing. It should be the priority. It should be the most important thing. It should be the place that we start our day, our lives, our journey with Christ, our evangelism efforts, our mission efforts, all of those kinds of things. Prayer is oxygen for the believer. Someone said it like this. John Stott said, "To be a Christian without prayer is no more possible than to be alive without breathing." We have to breathe to live. It's essential to our existence. So is prayer. It's basic. It's vital. It enables everything else we do. We learn to pray as if our lives depend on it. In a very real sense, they do. Second thing, Jesus made prayer priority, first priority. Mark 1:35 says, "Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, went to a solitary place where he prayed." A lot of other people in the Bible made it a big priority too, Paul and the disciples and others. But Jesus got up and prayed first. And if he had to do that as the Son of God to connect to the Father for the day, shouldn't we also? So let's talk about what prayer isn't, and then we'll talk about what it is. It's not just casual conversation with God. It is talking to God, but it's more than that. If we just trivialize it down to that as if he's our buddy or whatever, we're trivializing what it really is, and we're missing out on what it really is. It's not just a casual conversation between me and God. And it's not using God to get something for ourselves. He's not a genie in a lamp. We're not twisting his arm to try to get something. We're not wrestling with him to try to get what we want. We don't get to demand it. We don't get to name it and claim it. It's not that. So then what is it? Prayer is connecting with God's power, God's strength, and God's wisdom. We live our lives powered by the Spirit, empowered by the Spirit, for the mission through prayer. We offer the cares of our hearts, and he accepts those. We cry out to him. We experience him as we pray, as we talk to him. John Owen Chika said this, "When I offered the cares of my heart, every one of them, I met a God who wasn't as scared to take those cares on as I was to share them." Second thing, prayer is calling on God's promises. The Bible's full of God's promises. We call on them through prayer. To call on his name is to claim his promises. It's to appeal to his character. It's a cry for help based on who we know God is. It's as if we're saying, "Are we there yet, God? Please bring about the things that you've promised." And then the third thing, prayer is God's prescription for life in a fallen world. Over the last few months, I've had to take 4 different medicines, and it's probably something I'm going to have to do for the rest of my life. Blood pressure, cholesterol-related medicines. The prescription that I get for that is not the solution. The prescription is the means to get the solution. It's the diagnosis, the prescription isn't the cure itself, but it's a mean to connect me to what I need. In the same way, prayer is God's prescription for life in a fallen world. It gives us hope before we repair our circumstances. Like David in Psalm 13, we can pass from desperation through prayer into hope. Fourth thing, prayer is connecting to God's power that gives us courage and humility. If I go to the White House to see the president and claim I know him, or a locker room to see an athlete and claim I know him, I'm not going to get anywhere because I don't really know them. But God is someone that's knowable. He's approachable. He's not some distant out there deity. Our Father in heaven, as the Lord's Prayer says, connects us to the top, connects us to the one at the top of the chain, connects us to the source. He holds the highest office in the land. He holds all the power. He doesn't need anybody's permission to do anything. Nobody can stop him because he has all the power. That should embolden us. That should humble us. That should encourage us to realize his power is at our disposal. We exist for him, not the other way around. We exist to give him the glory. It's all for his glory. So let's talk about two more things on the priority of prayer, and we'll close this out. Number one is this: pray both in suffering and in success. Sometimes we tend to do one or the other and not the other. Jesus faced the worst there was, and he cried out to the Father on the cross, in the garden, all these different situations. We should pray when life is great, and it will be at times. But we should also pray when life stinks, and it will be at times. We don't treat prayer like breathing, someone said. We treat it like prescription medication meant to get rid of an infection. Once the infection's gone, so is the frequency and fervency of our prayers. But the Bible literally calls us to pray without ceasing, all times, in all circumstances. The second thing is we strengthen our hands as we surrender our hearts. As Jesus wrestles in prayer, he submits to God's plan, even though it's not what he wants in Luke 22. And he receives incredible strength to go all the way to the cross. He agonizes in prayer, but he surrenders to God's plan, even though it's hard, and God strengthens him to do that. The same thing happens for the disciples. Same thing happens for us. They begin to look and talk and act like their Savior when they cry out to him in prayer. As they pour themselves out, it's strengthened not in the public eye, not in the public stuff, but through private, before the eyes of God, the ears of God. Intercessory prayer is simply talking to God on behalf of others in their needs, and it's critical to the health of a church, to a youth ministry, to our evangelism efforts, to our individual lives, to our mission efforts, and all that kind of stuff. Someone once said this: we must talk to God about others before we talk to others about God. Are we interceding for those around us? Are we praying for those that we care about, those who don't know Jesus, those who are far from him? Jesus was willing to shatter boundaries. He knew that God could do the impossible, so he prayed for it. And a lot of times we don't. Our prayers are weak. Too often we don't ask God to do the impossible. We ask him to do what's already doable, what we can attempt in our own strength. Tonight, make a list of friends that you know don't know Jesus. Pray for them. Confess your own sins, your own struggles, your own lack of faith, your own disbelief. Make a point to make regular communication with God, to God, on behalf of others for all types of things, to make it a priority as you move forward in your journey with him. It's so important. It needs to be first thing.